Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragon.
Welcome to Gracefully Grieving. I am your host, family law attorney Henry Gornbein. I'm also a partner in the law firm of Lippitt O'Keefe Gornbein in Birmingham. Every week on Gracefully Grieving, I explore with my guests issues that we face as we are getting older or gracefully graying. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am pleased to welcome back Becky Eizen of Feinberg Consultants as we discuss really a very important topic, and that is caregiving and when should you have a caregiver. And you know, as we're thinking about it, I'm thinking about two situations. One personal, when my father was 90, he had surgery on he had one eye that he'd lost the vision of many years earlier because of cataract surgery that went awry. And then his good eye he had some surgery on, and he was healing nicely, and then he fell and destroyed the vision in his right eye. And from then on it was all downhill, and we had a caregiver who was wonderful. And then I know of a situation where someone lost a parent, and they have another aging parent who's in her mid-90s, and they refuse to have a caregiver, so there are two adult women in their mid-60s who literally 24/7 take turns sleeping at their mother's house. And it's not a matter of money, it's a matter of this is how they want to do it. So I guess everyone's different. And Becky, I didn't mean to digress, but to me it's a fascinating, it's such an important topic, because as we reach certain ages, I guess a vast majority of us will need caregivers. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do with Feinberg Consulting, and then let's go into this topic.
Excellent. Thanks for having me. At Feinberg Consulting, I am the Chief Relations Officer. In that role, I am responsible for building relationships with other professionals whose main focus is taking care of others. It could be physicians, attorneys, financial planners, and working with them and their clients so that when they get to a point when they need caregiving, and we'll get into that shortly, we can support in that venture. My professionally, I've been in the world of geriatrics for over 16 years. I have a master's in business and an undergrad in sociology. And I also hold a certification as a certified senior advisor, a certified dementia practitioner, and I'm a proud member of a professional organization known as the Aging Life Care Association. So the world of geriatrics, getting older, we're all living longer, and you're going to find yourself, most people, in that role of caregiving, be it directly or indirectly. And you know, 40 million Americans are providing caregiving services, according to the statistics.
That's a huge number.
Big number.
Why don't you tell us about caregiving? What do we mean when we're talking about caregiving?
So caregiving is really the role that someone might take on in caring for another individual. It could be your spouse, it could be your mother, your father, could be a loved one. And most people find themselves in the role of caregiving and don't realize it. It just happens. More will take on this role as we continue to age. And you know, there are upsides and downsides to caregiving. There's nothing better than giving back and taking care of your parents who raised you, and now it's your time to, if you will, you know, pay it forward and take care of them. It's a very, very meaningful job. It's also probably one of the most stressful things you'll ever do. And you know, the upsides, you know, you love them, and it's a selfless act. And it really creates a family bonding. I know personally when my brother was taking care of my dad, you know, they didn't always get along growing up. But as my father aged and my brother was able to take care of him, they really, really bonded and created a beautiful relationship near the end of my father's life. So it can be very, very meaningful. At the same time, incredibly stressful.
I can imagine, Becky. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about what are the types of caregivers and what are licensing requirements, if any, in Michigan?
So in Michigan, there is no licensing for private duty caregiving, and that is a really, it comes as a shock to many people. So in the world of caregiving, you can find them different areas. You can go through an agency. Some are franchises where they have to comply by the rules and regulations of the franchisee. Other organizations such as Feinberg Consulting, we have our own caregivers. We hire them, we train them, we place them.
How do you screen them?
We go through a myriad of interviews. We also do a background check. We do fingerprinting. We will also do personal references. And the experience is very important to us. And again, the insurance piece I think is really important that's overlooked. It is not cheap to get caregiving in the home. And one of the big takeaways, we'll wrap it up at the end, but the big takeaway is balance. To have a balance of caregiving. It's okay for a family member to do caregiving, but in many cases it is at the risk of their own personal gain. And what I mean by that is, statistically speaking, MetLife just came out with a report that said there's almost $1 billion that people lose in the country in terms of lost wages, Social Security benefits, pensions, because people give that up to care for their loved one. And at the same time, they don't take care of themselves because they're so stressed out. There's a tremendous imbalance because they want to do it themselves and they don't reach out to get a caregiver in the home. So that is, we screen them incredibly detailed, but there's private duty caregiving as well, and there are risks associated with that. So it's a balance.
Becky, when does someone need a caregiver?
The key is really when there's a change in the life of an older adult or an individual. Could be a surgery, could be a fall, as you mentioned earlier, could be they're going in for surgery, like I said, a fall, any change in cognition and a change in what they might consider their normal lifestyle. You should consider getting care in the home.
What are the types? Why don't you tell us about the role that a caregiver plays?
Some people, when they look for a caregiver, they're just happy to have someone in the home, someone to help out. But the role of a caregiver is really critical and sometimes really misunderstood. They are going to be that gatekeeper. They're going to be taking care of your loved one and getting to know them. So they can be that key communicator and helping identify if something isn't right, and then communicating that back to the family. So the role of the caregiver is really to be that conduit between the individual and the family member or who's ever in charge.
What are the characteristics of a successful caregiver?
There are, I believe, 5 major characteristics of a great caregiver. They need to be patient. Sometimes when you're dealing with older adults,
that's probably a very big one.
Really important to be patient. Compassionate is a really important characteristic. Attentive to individuals' needs. In this day and age, I think we're all addicted to our phones and not always paying attention to what's going on around us. So being attentive to the older adult. Dependable is probably the number one. So often in the world of caregiving, there is a deficit. It's hard to find good caregivers. Another reason to go with agencies. And the dependability factor, when you're depending on someone to come and take care of your loved one, life happens. There needs to be a backup plan. And then lastly, trustworthy. They need to be trustworthy.
I think that's a big issue because I know situations, I know someone who has a caregiver who isn't fully trustworthy, but there's such a good relationship between the caregiver and the person who's receiving the care that I guess the deficit is outweighed by the other factors.
Lines can be blurred, definitely, when there is a caregiver that really creates a relationship, and sometimes it can be an unhealthy relationship where you need an interruption, and that's where a geriatric care manager or a professional might be able to come into play to run that interference, if you will, with the caregiver when it's not a good situation. But they love the caregiver, so it's really hard.
What's the difference, Becky, between a medical and non-medical caregiver?
So medical caregiver is sometimes known as a skilled caregiver. This is someone who would come into the home and perform a very specific skill. Could be PT, OT, or speech therapy. It is usually paid for by Medicare. Big difference. Non-medical is a private pay caregiver, and they come in for periods of time. Usually it's 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, but it's going to be a period of time. And they really sometimes are unsupervised, where they're going to come into the home without direction. That's really important, is that the caregiver needs direction on what they're going to be doing. It's not just about sitting around and being a babysitter, if you will, to the older adult. There are specific skills or tasks that need to be completed when you have a caregiver in the home. So again, non-medical is skilled, usually paid for by Medicare. That will be the medical care, and then the non-skilled, if you will, is private pay. So skilled, Medicare; non-skilled, private pay.
What if you have long-term care insurance? Would non-medical qualify for that?
In some cases, yes. If a person has a long-term care policy, the policy will typically pay for the non-skilled care in a home for a period of time, and every policy is different. So another reason to reach out to a professional so they can help the family understand what benefits a family can take advantage of through the long-term care policy. So it can be a very long process getting approved for the long-term care, but yes, it can pay for non-skilled care.
Becky, how does someone find a caregiver, whether skilled or non-skilled? And I imagine Feinberg Consulting is one easy answer, but what are some of the answers? So
obviously we can use the internet and we can Google, what do I look for in a caregiver? But there's a checklist, and I would invite the viewers, if they want to email me, I have an easy checklist. No strings attached. I want to help out. They can email me. It is my first initial last name, B. Eizen, E-I-Z-E-N, at feinbergconsulting.com. Again, it's B. Eizen at feinbergconsulting.com, and I can give them a checklist on what to look for when they're hiring caregivers.
Is the checklist short that we could go through on the air right now?
So the checklist is short, but a lot of it involves questions. You want to learn about someone's background. You want to learn about how many years have they been in the business. You want to learn, are they a home health aide? Are they a certified nursing assistant? Do they have a CPR certification? Is it up to date? Do they have experience in, perhaps your loved one might have a catheter, or they might have home infusions that they need administered. So the medical component is very important. Do they have a dependable car that they're going to drive to work? Do they have a license? That's kind of a given, but you need to ask these things, and proper insurance.
So there are a lot of good questions, and I think we reached our first break point. We'll be right back with my guest, Becky Eizen of Feinberg Consulting, as we discuss issues in caregiving right after this break.
Maple Lane Golf Club is a 54-hole golfing treasure located in the heart of Sterling Heights. Maple Lane Golf Club offers immaculate greens, a top-flight pro shop, and inexpensive green fees. For convenience, book your tee time online at maplelanegolf.com. Come out and enjoy a great golf experience. Try our 9 and Dine special, 9 holes of golf, and enjoy food and refreshments in the Clubhouse Bistro. That's Maple Lane Golf Club in Sterling Heights. Check us out at maplelanegolf.com.
Welcome back to Pop That Culture.
Bury the phone in the pet cemetery. It's got a cord.
Welcome back to the Craig Foley Show.
Our votes don't matter.
I always disagree.
Doing this show, I feel like I get a little bit of time to chit-chat with the man
Yeah.
that I fell in love with.
Oh.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Greg Russell Movie Show. Writer, producer, director. How did this whole thing come about for you?
The Bee Gees song, Staying Alive, just might help someone you know stay alive. It's one of those beats you just can't get out of your head once it's there. And it turns out the disco song has 103 beats per minute, which happens to be the perfect number to maintain the rhythm for performing CPR. A study out of Illinois found that doctors and medical students who listened to the song while they were practicing CPR not only performed flawlessly, but they also remembered the technique 5 weeks later. The keys to CPR are performing the technique aggressively, that is, pushing hard enough and pushing on the chest fast enough to force the blood to where it needs to go. So when it comes to proper technique, it turns out that compressing the chest to the beat of Staying Alive really can help the victim stay alive. With another prescription for your health, I'm Dr. Jim Bragman.
We are back with my guest, Becky Eizen of Feinberg Consulting, as we discuss the really important issue of caregiving. Becky, before the break we were talking about some of the pros and cons, and I guess you have something to add, so let's start there.
So thank you, Henry. And what I wanted to add was, I think the topic of caregiving is very, very appropriate. There was a recent article in USA Today, and actor Rob Lowe addressed what he went through in caring for his sick mother when she was ill. And one of the statistics that I was sharing earlier is around some of the lost wages and the financial impact of caring for a loved one. And I wanted to be very specific. This MetLife study talks about that caregivers are sacrificing almost $3 trillion a year in lost wages. So I wanted to make sure that we were accurate on that number. And, again, while it's a very meaningful job, caregiving can be very, very stressful and can add to the individual, the caregiver who's providing that care to suffer a lot of financial strains in addition to the physical strains of not taking care of themselves. And I talk a lot about when you're taking care of your children when they're sick, you need to be well. You need to take care of yourself to take care of someone else. So if you're not taking care of yourself, then you can't do a good job of taking care of an older adult. And so I want to really stress caregiving can really, really help in the process of aging.
Becky, I use the same analogy in my family law divorce and custody practice, saying that think of an airline, and if you're going into a situation where there may be a fall or some danger, the air masks come down, and unless you start breathing the oxygen yourself, you can't help anyone else.
That's
so
right.
You've got to take care of yourself, because otherwise you're useless to someone else. And it brings me to mind, I right now have a relative who's in very late stage Alzheimer's and dementia, and this is an aunt, and my uncle has been a caregiver of her for years, watching her fade away more and more and more. And I think they're getting a little help, but what's devastating, it's like you put your whole life on hold and the world kind of passes you by, and it's like, I'm not saying don't care, don't love, don't do what you can, but as you're saying, you got to take care of yourself first, otherwise you're going to destroy yourself, and I think that's an important point.
Really important. The key word is balance. Really, right. You need to have a balance of providing that care, and then just being the spouse, being the child, being the loved one. So it's really, really important to step back sometimes and ask for help. And if there's anything besides the balance component that the viewers can take away today, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay.
I think it's a good thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You were going through a checklist. Are there any other points you want to cover before we move on?
No, I would invite the viewers that if they want to email me, they can, and I'll send them that exhaustive checklist. And I say exhaustive because there's a lot of questions that you need to answer in the process. So.
What we'll also do, I'd like to post it on my Gracefully Graying website, so this will be available for anyone who accesses that as well. And
excellent,
so,
excellent.
How does someone determine what is needed by a caregiver?
Besides a checklist, I think it's really important. Sometimes people feel when they get a caregiver in the home that everything's going to be okay. I just need a caregiver, which many people will call my office and say, I just want a caregiver. And that is one piece of the puzzle. It's a big piece of the puzzle, but there's so much more. There's the medication management. There is the oversight. It's going to the doctor's office. Who's going to interpret the information? If there's a change in medication, who's going to make sure that that medication is changed? It's meals, making sure that an individual is eating and that they're really important drinking. So many older adults end up in the hospital because of dehydration, because they're not drinking enough during the day. Sometimes medication, takes away from your appetite. It can change your need to drink, or you don't want to drink or eat. So that getting an assessment and understanding the comprehensive issue of what to expect from the caregiver, and that the caregiver knows what to expect, that they don't just walk into a situation and family is like, okay, see you later, without any direction. You're missing the big boat there.
Becky, what about communication issues?
Communication is really, really important. Who is in charge is probably one of the biggest questions that needs to be answered. And when I say who's in charge, I'm talking both from a legal standpoint. Is there a power of attorney? Is there someone that has been designated as the spokesperson? Sometimes parents think they're doing the right thing and give equal opportunity to their kids, and sometimes that really causes more problems than what it is intended. So there should be one person that is the spokesperson. Now that doesn't mean that the other family members can't have a say in what's going on. That's where the communication within the family is important. But to find out who's in charge, if the older adult is their own speaking for themselves, and they can and are able cognitively to speak for themselves, they're the ones that should be in charge. But in the event that they really can't, and there's some dementia that is there, it's really important to find out who's that one go-to person, because many times there's too many cooks in the kitchen, as they say.
Well, that's an important point, and I guess I did a show with an attorney friend of mine whose parents are in their 90s, and she, because she's an attorney, kind of has been the sibling with most of the decision making. I'm also involved in a case where there are two siblings. They couldn't agree on anything, and it ended up in litigation. And sadly, a week ago, I was contacted by my client, who informed me that his mother had passed away. He was not informed by the nursing home or by his brother, who he is estranged from, and found out like 3 or 4 days after she had passed away. So it's like, I think there's got to be communication, and what you're saying about too many cooks in the kitchen, but sometimes you have siblings or relatives who are going at it. So how do you ferret this out? What was the advice that you would give on this issue?
So the advice I would present on this issue is to really seek a third party. Get someone, a professional, a geriatric care manager who can really mediate, who can really run that interference. We've sat down with many a family in our office. At the end of the day, I truly believe that we want the best for our loved one. We might not always agree on how we're going to get there, but at the end of the day, we want the best for our mother, our father. And so to sit down and have a discussion on what that might look like can be very beneficial for all the parties. So to really have that person that's going to run the interruption or the interception, if you will, and listen to both parties and come to an agreement. That's where a professional geriatric care manager can support, so that even if you're an attorney or a physician or someone in the field of healthcare, having someone look at it from a different angle and present it differently can really support the family and, most importantly, the outcome of the loved one.
Becky, what are some of the things that your role with Feinberg Consultants or other people there can do in this area to help people?
I think just sitting down with a professional, most professional organizations, be it Feinberg Consulting or otherwise, will have a conversation or a free introductory meeting with a family to let them know how they can support, what they can do, so that at the end of the day, our job is to provide the best care for the older adult. So really being able to be open to feedback, be open to hearing things that you might not like to hear, but understanding that it's coming from a vantage point of we want the best for your loved one. So sitting down with a professional to understand what resources are available, I think can really, really support the family unit.
Becky, what happens in this conversation? Let's say I'm coming in, loved one is perhaps dementia, perhaps a fall and needs care. What goes on?
So when a family will come into our office, we'll sit down with them and first of all find out what's changed, because something has changed in the trajectory to cause an upset. So to get to understand what's really happened, and then we can kind of guide the family on what it might look like as far as a care plan and moving forward. It could involve going to a nursing home for rehab for a brief period of time. It could involve staying at home and bringing in care. It could involve moving somewhere and what that might look like, and helping the family understand what's available in terms of resources. This is a journey that many people have never been on before. So it's uncharted territory and it's scary. The unknown can be very, very scary, not knowing what to do. So coming in, just hearing what's out there, what an organization can do to support the family is the first start in getting help.
Becky, we're down to 1 minute in the show. What are some final thoughts that you'd like to share with us and our viewers before we sign off?
So final thoughts, again, I would encourage your viewers to email me at beeisen@feinbergconsulting.com. I'll be happy to provide that free checklist. Secondly, it's all about balance. You cannot do it all yourself. It's like the analogy that I use of a football team. You need to have a team of professionals working with you. You're going to have a quarterback, but you're going to have a bunch of different players where the outcome is obviously to get a touchdown, if we're using football as an analogy. And I think the last is it's okay to ask for help. In fact, I think it's a sign of strength to ask for help because you don't know it all. So to be able to ask for help is really critical.
I mean, a good analogy, you're not going to perform surgery on yourself, and these are important issues. These are sometimes life-shattering events, and it's better to have more help than ignoring it. So,
Absolutely.
Becky Eizen of Feinberg Consulting, I want to thank you so much for being my guest on Gracefully Graying. I really enjoy having you.
Thank
and
you.
I want to thank you for watching Gracefully Graying.